Welcome to Kelly Minds Her Manners, a podcast about real estate and entrepreneurship with a twist. Here's your host, Kelly Robinson.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Priscilla.
Happy
Priscilla
to be here.
Facey is a real estate developer, broker, and she actually purchased her first home at age 23 years old. She is one of the only female real estate developers that I have personally been able to find. And she focuses on new construction in the Niagara Falls area.
Yeah.
So I'm super stoked to have her on the show. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And before we get started and we go through your journey, I just wanted to ask you, how does it feel to be a woman, a successful female developer in a part of the industry that is so male dominated and really can be a bit of a boys club? At least I know that here in New York City, it's the old boys club. And it can be tough to kind of break in or break through as a female. So I would love to hear how you feel about that and if there have been any challenges with that and how you've maybe overcome them.
Well, it's interesting. I know my perspective on it is definitely an unpopular one, or maybe just a less common one. I honestly don't give it much attention. In fact, I got into real estate development through the encouragement of two guys that owned a real estate brokerage that I was working at. So prior to getting into development, I was a real estate agent in downtown Toronto for about 10 years. And the two guys who owned the brokerage started moving on into the development space and ultimately sold their real estate brokerage. And I initially went along for some learning opportunities and to kind of see, what is development all about? Because I sold pre-construction for builders. So I knew that side of the curtain. Now getting into development on the other side, like what happens leading up to sales and marketing. Because as you know, as a real estate agent, you understand the process from the point that they launch sales. And so for me, they actually encouraged me, like, listen, like, it's going to be more lucrative. Let's step up, the game to the next level. I had some investment properties and flips that I was doing. So I was understanding the very painful process of renovations. And they encouraged me to get into it. And so for the most part, I generally am the only female in the room, especially when it comes to now I'm in full-fledged construction on my first site. But I don't give it much attention. I mean, I'm professional. I work with professionals. I haven't had me being a woman become an issue or an obstacle. It's something that I'm aware of,
Right.
So I'm not going to show up to, maybe we had a team meeting for all the construction and all the trades at a dinner, and I'm not going to show up in a skin tight dress. With,
Right.
That should go without saying, I think, in any profession, but I honestly, I don't give it much attention, but I'm aware of it because how can you not be aware,
Yeah.
So I'm aware that other people probably give it attention and they probably adjust their behavior to me. So maybe they're not swearing as much as they normally would. I've gotten a couple of like, oh, sorry, hun, sorry, dear, which is always very interesting. I'm not significantly not younger than you, I'm not your child.
Right.
I think it's just kind of social habit, but that's kind of my take on it. I'm just pressing through. I'm just ignoring it. And I'm not going to make it an issue unless it's something that evidently becomes something that I have to address.
Right. I think that's the right way to approach it, to be honest. And I'm glad to hear that you haven't dealt with any challenges because of it. So keep doing you. To get started, you bought your first home, and this was before you became an agent at age 23. How did you manage to do that in an environment where people have so much money in student loans and all this debt when they get out of college? How were you able to purchase a home?
I had the debt for sure. I had a collection agent calling me. His name was Mr. Bonavolta. I will never forget his name or his voice. He had so much bass. And I was behind in my student line of credit. My dad co-signed the student line of credit for me. Plus I had a government student loan on top of that. So I was probably in and around $35,000 in. But buying pre-construction really is the easiest access point. And I'm imagining it's the same in New York. That's definitely the case here in Toronto, the Toronto area. I basically back then, and this is many years ago now, but just outside of the city in the suburbs, I bought a townhouse. And what happens a lot of times, as you're well aware, when builders are near the end of their inventory, they're more flexible on the deposit structures. They're probably a lot closer to construction. Their construction loans are pretty much financed. And so I was able to buy with 5% down. Back then, this property in the city outside of Toronto was 250,000. So all I needed was 12,500 bucks. I mustered that together. I had gotten my first job at a university. I was living with my parents still. So I saved the 12K and I put the money down. And then between that and when it was almost finished, I saved up, closing costs. So I bought with 5% down.
That's amazing.
That's how I did it. And by the time I'd lived there for about a year, and then Mr. Bonavolta was calling me heavy. And so at that point, the property was up about $100,000. So I sold, bought a smaller condo, but I used the bulk of the money to pay off my student loan. So I always say my first real estate purchase basically paid for my university education. So
that's amazing. And what was your thought process behind purchasing a home when you had this collections agency calling you and saving that money instead of paying that off to buy a home? I mean, because it actually is really smart.
It is. It was risky, but I knew home ownership was always really important to me. I grew up renting. My mom rented. We moved around a lot because we were renters. And so owning something for myself was something that was just really important and kind of drilled into that you should own a house. Like most people, buying a house feels like you've achieved something, right? Now, I also knew that there were people making money off real estate, and I couldn't quite figure out how. I hadn't really educated myself on it yet. But when I bought the house and saw how much money it was going up, and even buying from the builder, you see the next sales release. Oh, my floor plan has gone up, $20,000. So you're seeing something. Now, exactly how to execute and get the cash back wasn't fully understood by me at that time, but I knew, generally speaking, that if you owned real estate, this was a good way to make money in general. And wealthy people that I had heard of, because I didn't have wealthy friends, they owned multiple properties. So I knew that some way, somehow, this was, a way in. And that's kind of what drove me to buy a property to begin with. And I also was aware that ways to make money didn't include sitting in a bank account. The bank account was sort of like the vehicle to what was next, and I think a lot of people get caught up on saving. My parents grew up pretty poor, so they were always paycheck to paycheck kind of vibe. But I just knew that investing some way, somehow was going to be the better way. And so I got in. I saw the opportunity and I jumped on it.
Well, good for you for taking that risk. And I'm going to say something to the audience right now. Rewind if you have to and listen to what Priscilla said, because it is true. And I can second this. My wealthiest clients own multiple properties, whether it's residential, commercial, land, you name it, they own it. And that's how they got that wealthy.
No, it's the only way. And I mean, there's so many ways to make money in real estate. I mean, whether you're doing, there's the BRRRR method where you renovate and then take your equity out. They're just buying pre-construction, a lot more hands off, put your deposit down, sit and wait. And then there's ways to make money once you actually have the property rented out. There's cash flow opportunities, there's mortgages getting paid down. And then there's refinancing, which is the best part of all, is as the property goes up in value, you pull cash out and you can use that to buy more property. You have to get creative with financing multiple properties later, but people are doing it. And so it's not about what are they doing that I can't do. It's how can I do what they're doing? Right. And so that how can I get there approach is really the key to getting anywhere you want to go with anything in life.
Yeah. Now, do you ever flip contracts and not close? Have you ever gone that route?
Yeah. So that's we call it assignment. And so I've done that in the past. So when I was selling real estate, a lot of what I did was use my commissions to buy more property. And so even sometimes with builders, maybe your commission is going to be 10, 20,000 on a deal. Well, don't give that to me. Give me a unit and deduct that off the purchase price. And maybe I'll sell 2 or 3 or 4 units in the same building. And instead of collecting the paycheck, which I'm going to pay tax on that income, I was just getting a property. And so that's another way, if you're a licensed realtor, to start collecting properties where you're working for the property versus the check per se. But yeah, flipping. So when I was buying condos back then, I would take the contract, and closer to the time that it was built, I would flip it over to somebody else and then take my profit. So that's definitely another strategy. And you're literally just moving money around. So people, like, you can put your money in a bank account, or you can put your money with a builder, find a reputable builder with a good reputation. And then when the property is built out, maybe you make 20, 30, 50,000, who knows? In New York, you could make $100,000 in a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it happen. Now where you are developers mostly willing to do assignments? Because here it's hit or miss, and you really have to get in the beginning. You have to know somebody. Your agent has to have a good relationship with them to do an assignment.
And this is really the key. And I would always encourage clients to work with an agent who does focus on investment properties and does have access to pre-construction deals, and who's got those relationships with builders. Here in Toronto, most builders have that in. If it's not in the deal, you can request it. So when your lawyer does a review of the contract before you sign up and go firm on the deal, you can request it in. It's always a good exit strategy. So if you can get it 100%, because that's just another path to making money without closing. And in the mortgage climate we're in right now, it's challenging getting financing. And so having that opportunity just gives you more choice, right?
Yeah. So what did you study in college? It wasn't anything having to do with real estate, right?
No.
And what were you doing when you bought your first home? Because you weren't originally a real estate broker.
No. So I studied political science, which was kind of a fast, but probably go nowhere degree, unless I wanted to get into law, which I didn't. I think lawyers, for the most part, are unhappy. But so I studied poli-sci, and then I got into real estate because I bought my first pre-construction property, and then I started telling my friends about it. And my friends said, "Oh, what's this, that you're doing?" And literally, I got about 8 people to buy properties in the same
wow.
And the real estate broker who, later became a mentor and owned the brokerage that I first joined, he was like, "Oh, you realize you just sold 8 deals. I just showed up for documents, but you did the sale. You should get into real estate." And I was working at the government, and I was making, government salary, $45,000 a year was my starting salary. And then eventually I moved up in government, and then real estate came along, and I was like, please, yes, I want something that's exciting, that's like make my own hours. I'm not stuck in a cubicle all day,
Yeah.
And so I got into real estate sales and literally didn't look back, and then started, buying properties and doing flips and condo assignments. And, it kind of just took off from there, and then eventually led into development. So just buying land, some dividing, the zoning, the sales and marketing, which is the easy part for me. And then now in the phase of construction. Yeah.
So the project that you're working on now, is this your first full-on development?
It's my first solo project. So my actual first project I partnered in with the guys who owned my brokerage that got into development. So I owned a condo. I had a fair amount of equity in there, maybe close to 200,000. And there was an opportunity to partner up on that first project. And so I got to learn all the back end stuff, all the zoning and the planning and everything that goes into the approvals. And then I got to learn the construction, the fun part. Those units just closed last week, actually. And
so congratulations.
And so, but in the meantime, though, an opportunity came along that was a good deal, too small for them, but they said, "Hey, we're already in this. Why don't you move over here?" And so then I picked up that lot, and we're now in full-fledged construction on that one. And that's my first official solo, no partner site. Yeah.
That's so exciting. So why don't you tell everybody about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the project is called the Boho. It's 27 stacked townhomes over 2 building blocks. It's in Niagara Falls, right in the tourist area. So the beauty of that location and what I love about Niagara Falls is that you've got low vacancy rates. So for anyone wanting to get into development or just looking to buy real estate in general, always look for low vacancy rates, but really good rental rates as well. And a good quality tenant demographic. And so a lot of people work in the tourism industry. It's a robust industry. And so salaries are decent, but I am also building product that is very affordable. So I make smaller units. I don't have these big sprawling layouts, more New York style
Mm-hmm.
floor plans. And so when the price point is lower, you're not going to run into a revenue problem. You should be able to execute sales very successfully.
Right.
So that project sold out in 2 weeks. I released it over Christmas, and I was sold out
Wow.
the first week of January.
That's amazing. Good for you. And when is it closing?
So we are at the framing stage. So we should be closed in, I would say, the spring. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you think that the majority of your buyers are going to be end users or investors?
I think for the most part, it's investors, but that could turn over. My buyers all have an option to assign.
Okay.
So usually on the assignment, the person coming in to buy the assignment is an end user
It's an end
typically.
user. Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we've got such a shortage of housing that and such high immigration rates, and these are other factors to consider when you're looking at land to develop, that we need more housing. And so there's no shortage of buyers to come in and purchase real estate at this particular time.
Yeah. What advice would you give somebody who really wants to build equity through real estate, but can only afford to rent in the city they live in?
I'm a big advocate for rent where you need to live and buy where you can afford. So if you can't afford New York City, that's not a problem. Buy something somewhere else, even in another state, even in another, town. There's just certain criteria you should look for when you're buying a property to rent out, but start building that equity. It's such an easy, like I equate when you rent and you don't own, you're literally just, you may as well walk into Apple, buy a MacBook and just throw it off the balcony every month. This is money going into the toilet. And so you've got to build that equity somewhere. And I think people get really stuck on, my first purchase should be my home. But why? Like, why does it have to be that way? And so I think that using real estate as an investment vehicle, you're putting your money somewhere. I mean, maybe you're spending it, at fancy restaurants, or maybe you're spending it, on designer clothing, but it's got to go somewhere. So carve out that money and just start buying real estate and just look for opportunities.
Such good advice. And it's so true. Most people do. They think that their first purchase should be their home. And you need to think about it from an investment and an long-term equity standpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What is your client demographic? Are they for the most part end users, investors? Do you get a mix of that in New York?
I get it's a complete mix. I get a ton of investors, but I get a lot of end users as well. I would say it's about 60-40 end users to investors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and a lot of my, and actually 2 or 3 of my end users have started doing exactly what you just advised. And they've started buying real estate in other locations that's more affordable just to build equity. I have a great client who's a composer, and he does, he creates music for television and theater and all these sorts of things. And he has this amazing life. And he owns his home, and he's so, as such an analytical person, the numbers are really important to him. And he's really good about, getting the numbers right when he invests in property. And he just started investing in little small deals here and there. And now he's investing in bigger deals.
Yeah.
And it's great. He's thinking of buying a bigger home for himself.
Yeah. And this is the thing too, is another point that came to mind, is people can also partner up. Because half of something is better than all of nothing, right? And so if people don't have enough cash to buy a property, partner up with someone. And, whether it's a family member, friend. With real estate, it's all legal. You've got your paperwork, you're both on the deal, et cetera. There's no concern from that regard. But partner in, and then, eventually, once you start building equity, then the people can go off and buy their own individual properties, right? But at least get your foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for you?
I'm looking for bigger sites. So my current roster, I've got 3 projects in the active stages. So I've got 1 under construction. I've got another launch we're going to do next month in another city an hour east of Toronto. And then I've got another small project, just 15 units, I'm thinking of keeping as a long-term rental. So we're just running the numbers on that to start keep some rental assets. And then I think I'd like to do something a lot bigger. With development, you need scale. I get a better price on flooring if I've got 100,000 square feet versus 20,000 square feet, like anything. And so the larger projects, it is a bit more, there's more involved, obviously bigger construction loans, et cetera, but also I can get better pricing. So my building price is going to come down a lot. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for next. And I'm looking at JV opportunities as well as just some other opportunities just for larger sites.
Yeah. And you broker the deals in your buildings, right? Because you have your license, or do you have an on-site agent that you hire?
So it's funny. So I stopped actually transacting real estate about 3 years ago because I found every time I did a deal or had a listing, the project kind of got put on hold because I couldn't kind of both. So at this particular point, I do have someone in-house administering the sales. And so I don't broker the deals per se. I like to keep a little bit of arm's length that way as well. But we do have some brokers selling individually, and then I have someone in-house. So if we get any walk-ins that are not represented, they handle those sales.
Yeah, but I bet the agents that work for you love you because you were an agent and you know how important the feedback of the agent is. Whereas I have worked for some developers who are like that and they're great to work for. And then I've worked for others. You give them feedback from the clients who are the people who are going to buy, and they just, no, my project's the best. My project's this, my project's that. And it's you. So the fact that you have that experience probably helps your building sell better.
It does. And that experience comes in even at the design stage, right? So like I sold however many condos. I understand what's frustrating and I try to eliminate all of that from the get-go, from design. And even other things like, agents wanting to get paid on time, like the amount of follow-ups I used to have to do just to get my paycheck. I brought the client, we closed, we transacted. Why don't you pay me? And sometimes it can be months. So I'm a big advocate for just paying on time. If I get an invoice, this is going to be paid right away. And that's how you incentivize people to keep doing business with you, right? So
yeah. And what you said about the design process, that's absolutely true. I always advise developers that I know, whether I'm working on their project or not, to bring an agent in during the design process, because you have these architects and these big designers, and they do beautiful, beautiful work. Not knocking them. Their stuff is interesting. It's stunning. It's gorgeous. But, nobody wants to sit on a toilet that's all the way down here. You know what I mean? Like if you can't stand at the stove and have it be comfortable to work at it, they don't necessarily always think about practicality in the way people live.
No, that is so critical. Whether it's open concept, whether it's I don't need this like nook of a den. I'd actually rather adjust the layout and have a second bedroom. Windows wherever possible. Lighting is so important.
So important.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of interesting things, in a lot of design that we're sort of like, who thought of this? And so I opt to optimize and eliminate that as much as possible because it's quite interesting. Some of these properties you walk into. I'm sure you have. I've seen it all. I've seen European style kitchens with a laundry in the kitchen.
We have a lot of laundry in kitchens in New York City, actually. And it's fine when it's off to the side in a pantry somewhere, in a closet, but when it's right in smack in the middle of your kitchen, it's not easy to get down there and, really do your laundry. And then like you fold it on the countertop where somebody just ate. I don't know.
Oh, no.
So I get it. I get it 100%. And what you said about light is so true too. And especially after the COVID pandemic. I mean, more people are working from home and will be for the foreseeable future. So it matters more that you have light during the day. Whereas a lot of times people were like, well, I'm in work for 12 hours anyway during the day. Like it's going to be dark when I leave and dark when I get home. So who cares? But now things that don't have light are having a lot more trouble selling.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, these design things, and this can be a make or break. Sometimes I look at certain projects where they're having trouble selling and I'm like, but this is why. Look at these layouts. This is all, and so having that eye in early on is really key.
I have a couple of questions here, but you answered most of them already. Do you invest in the developments that you build? Do you usually buy a unit or?
So typically, the last project that where I partnered in, I did have a unit there, and then I actually recently sold it to move on and purchase more land.
Mhm.
In the current project, I am holding some developer units for the end. I might keep a couple. The thing when you're qualifying for construction financing, banks like to see assets. They don't necessarily, it's good if you've got liquid cash. It's good if you've got, projects that are on the go, but they like to see that you hold a lot of real estate. And so that's something that may not be the best use of money, but might help qualify,
Right.
and just to kind of keep assets. So I'm just looking at different ways to kind of have the best of both worlds where it's still lucrative. I'm not just making a few $100 a month off a rental. No, like how can we use it as a vacation rental unit? Can we have a more cash flow that justifies holding on to something for a few years versus liquidating, using the money to buy more land?
And buyers love to hear when the developer owns a unit in their own development because it makes them feel like that developer really believes in the project.
And I think that's definitely something that with one project, I'm actually looking at just keeping the whole thing, and just keeping that as an asset. But I have now, I mean, the more that I've gotten into this, the more people that I've got approaching me like, oh, can I grab a unit in one of your projects? Like, I know you, so I know it's going to, work out well. And that's where, when you're in real estate, much like yourself, like your reputation and your integrity becomes key because these are going to be the people that follow you. The endeavor that you do, really. So, yeah.
Man, if you had sold 8 units to your friends of one of my projects, I would tell you to get your real estate license too. Come work with me. You must have really good sales skills. I mean, that's amazing. Okay, so I have kind of an odd question, but there in New York City anyway, there's all of this talk about, okay, the closed off kitchen is coming back. I personally don't agree with that because everybody hangs out in the kitchen, whether you cook or not. I mean, I don't really cook. It's not that I can't, it's just that I don't. But I want a nice kitchen. I want a big open kitchen where people can sit down and hang out. Like, what do you think about that trend? Do you think that's true or do you think that's false?
What's coming to mind is that Seinfeld episode where Jerry's carpenter built the kitchen to close it off. He put the kitchen on the wrong side. And so you literally could not see into the living room, which is this wall. I'm not a fan. I think I agree with you. I think the kitchen is where people congregate. And especially what I learned in COVID was that a lot of people were bringing chefs into their homes. And part of the experience of that was you've got this open kitchen, you've got someone cooking, you're there, you're mingling, even if it's, just a regular family circumstance. Like the kitchen is kind of the hub. It's the room that people pay the most attention to. And for me, it's the area that people spend the most time in. To lose open concept and to have a closed off space, oh my God, no, this is immediately no.
I agree. I mean, only maybe twice in my 17 years have I had buyers say to me, I really want a closed kitchen. Twice in 17 years. And so for me, I'm right there with you. And I'm also, way back in the day, when people had staff and whatnot. Yes, you'd close off the kitchen and whatnot, but like, I kind of want to see who's preparing my food and what they're doing with it. I like to go to the restaurant where you can see the kitchen and make sure nobody's spitting in your food. You know what I mean? Like,
it's not even that though. It's also that like, I want to, don't just show me the plate. I like the process. I like seeing what's going into it, and a lot of like culinary skills are happening and, they're getting active and it's almost like a bit of a performance. And I think people nowadays want to see kind of what goes on behind the curtain. So to go back to closing off a kitchen, oh my God, even with staff, no, it's a no for me. I mean, if you've got the space, get the butler's pantry or the butler's.
Yeah, I agree.
But no, the openness, especially now, I think, especially in cities like New York, where there's so much population density, people are with families are in the kitchen. Well, if mom or dad's cooking, you want to see the kids open concept in the living room, what they're up to versus like, I've got to keep popping my head out.
Exactly.
And if something's burning, you need to see it. And no,
I agree. Plus two of your basic human needs are in the kitchen, food and water, like, don't you want easy access to that? I don't know. So, I'm glad that you solidified my concerns about that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you feel the same way, because I'm just like, when a developer's saying to me,
who are the architects doing this? Where are they?
I don't know. I mean, it's like it's like a little whisper going around the city right now. Well, we did a few units with closed kitchens because that's what people want. And I'm like, can you break that wall down? Like, I'm knocking on it. Like, is there a way we can open this up when they close? Because
Yeah.
I don't find most people want that. I have a couple of questions from audience members for you. So Kelly Higgins asked, how did you scale your development projects, and what's your advice for someone scared to start a similar career?
The easiest way to scale is if you partner up with someone, right? So, I mean, an individual with almost no experience in development or construction is probably going to want to start off with doing a renovation, whether it's a gut, whether it's because you want to really understand how to manage and run a project, how to keep a budget, how to ensure you're getting the best prices. These things involve having really good contacts in the trades and construction industry, developing those relationships. So if you want to start off in development, I would first start with owning a couple of properties and running a project. Smaller scale, that's manageable. You're not going to, bite off more than you can chew, but do one renovation. And that, if you can manage one renovation without losing it, you're ready for the next step.
Yeah.
It's that on steroids, but it's a similar skill set.
Cool. Thank you. And then we had one other one that I felt was a good one. What keeps you going every day? And part two is, what is the biggest challenge in your career?
What keeps me going every day, honestly, is I have a meditation practice that I do
great.
every morning. It's a ritual. The day is off if for some reason it doesn't happen. So it's important for me to have just those moments of calm, reflect, set intentions for what I want to accomplish, whether it's anything, whether it's, personal life or work. I set an intention every day. And lately I've been setting the intention to just feel peaceful, no matter what the circumstance is. And that has actually, every time I've set that intention, whatever was kind of on my worry radar actually completely worked out and resolved itself. So I think it's important to put out that energy. And the biggest challenge in my career, I would say my biggest challenge is being prepared for opportunities. And I've got that FOMO. I've always got fear of missing out. And so I'm going to say yes to the opportunity, and I'm going to figure out whatever it is to get to that point. And so I've entered into partnerships and agreements and, to buy properties where it didn't make sense. How was I going to come up with this capital, et cetera? But I said yes, and then I do the work, because if I miss it on the opportunity, that's going to keep me up at night forever. Literally forever. So
that's good. That's good. That's good advice. I mean, there are so many people who are just too scared, and then they could have had so many, amazing experiences, but they just didn't take the leap of faith.
Yeah. And that's the thing is really understanding that fear is just a story you're telling yourself in your mind. It's fear is never based on fact. And so we have stories and we make interpretations about anything, the guy who shows up to deliver something or whatever. We're constantly making interpretations all day long, but recognizing and being aware of that allows you to then move outside of your own head. And then I'm going to go through with this. And I think there's a strategy that actually one of the financial advisors I work with recommended. She says, ask yourself 7 times, okay, and if that doesn't work out, then what will you do? And then what will you do? And so usually the answer comes out to being like, this is not a problem. I'm making it a problem, So from I decided to get into development, when I decided to stop selling real estate to focus full-time on development, it was, okay, well, what am I concerned about? Well, if I don't have a steady income coming from this, okay, and then how are you going to resolve that? And then I started answering the 7 questions. And really, at the end of the day, I could always go back to selling real estate. So this didn't work out. This is really not a problem. So I'm making it a problem. I'm concerned for no reason. And so that was how I was able to sort of make that leap. But it's just getting out of your own head. We're like our own worst dream killers.
That's great advice. I'm going to take that advice. I'm going to start asking myself 7 times. True. I think it's great advice. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate you putting up with the changes that we had the first couple of times. I was so excited to speak with you and hear what you had to say, because I have so much respect for you, and I wish you even more success than you've already created. And I'm sure you will get there, because you don't seem like somebody who stopped. How can people find you? We're going to put all of your information in the comments.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Priscilla Facey. And my company website is buildupdevco.com. And yeah, I've got a newsletter we work on every month that we send out to kind of keep posted on the so yeah, that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm grateful for your time, and I'm going to continue to watch your story, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you for watching and listening to Kelly Minds Her Manners. Make sure to subscribe to the show, and don't forget to leave us a review to tell us what you liked about the episode. You can connect with Kelly at Kelly Minds Her Manners on Instagram and TikTok, or on our website, www.kellymindshermanners.com.